Hi, Jose. Welcome.
Hello.
I'm Nancy. Hold on, put my screen on. I'm Nancy Champlin. I'm the executive director at Southeast Uplift.
Hi.
Hi. I'm gonna
Okay.
go off camera and have a little sip of water and wait for folks to hop in here.
Okay. Hopefully we'll get people in.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Good evening. Just a matter of seconds, but it changes one's physical and financial. Oops. Okay, it looks like we're all here.
Is my audio not functioning?
I can hear you again.
I can
Okay,
hear you.
all right, wonderful. Appreciate that, the affirmation here. Okay. Closing 5,000 different screens. Well, good evening. I don't see a lot of faces. Hi, Juliet, I see you. And that's okay. I understand it's evening time. It's no problem. If faces is not for you right now, that's okay. But please feel free to join on camera if you would like. My name is Kimberly Dixon, and I want to say good evening to you. And I'm so grateful that everybody is here. I am the District Coalition Supervisor in the Office of Community and Civic Life. I am thrilled that we are being hosted by Southeast Uplift. We have Nancy here. Nancy, do you want to say hello to everybody?
Hey everyone, Nancy Champlin, Executive Director at Southeast Uplift, and just a couple of housekeeping items. We're Machu, my colleague who just came on screen, is going to, if he hasn't already, enable closed captioning. This webinar is being recorded. It is a webinar versus a meeting, and so all of the guests, there was close to 50 registrants for this event, so they won't be on screen, but panelists will be on screen. If folks have a question, feel free to use the Q&A function to submit your question. And there's also the ability to upvote a question, and Machu will facilitate the Q&A. So he'll be tracking that, so the rest of the panelists don't have to be distracted with that. So I'm going to go off camera and let you all get back to your webinar.
All
Yeah,
right.
thanks so much. Please use that upvote function. If there's a lot of questions, we want to make sure the questions that are most pressing to you all are answered in the limited time we have available tonight. Glad to see you here.
Thank you so much for that, Machu. And I'll just remind everybody, we will be answering questions at the end of our presentation. So thank you for your patience with that. I also want to acknowledge we have Civic Life staff present. We have representatives from GTAC here with us. So I'm super excited that they are here with us, and it's going to be a really good night of information. Please also know this is the third of 4 of our community information sessions. So we're very glad that you're here, but know that we also have one in person, although this was also planned to be a hybrid as well, but we just weren't quite sure about our weather. So we wanted everybody to be safe and warm for sure. So next week we will be in the Portland building starting at 6 o'clock. We will be right on the main floor. So please do make yourself available to come and attend that one, either virtually or in person. With that, without further ado, I would love to make space for our friends over here at GTAC. We have Jose and Juliet who are here, and I'd love to make space for them to come and share. And if you all want to introduce yourselves and take it away, the floor is yours. I'm not sure who's going first, so go.
And do you
Go-
have the slides?
Let's go alphabetically. I don't have any slides for this meeting. I'm just here to observe.
Machu, are you running slides for us, or do
I
I
am.
need to?
Just let me know when you'd like to begin.
Okay.
You could start whenever. I'm Jose Gamero, and that was Juliet. We're members of the Government Transition Advisory Committee. And we can get the slides going. I can start with our presentation.
And I'll be presenting something at the February 20th meeting for District 4. So I'm looking forward to that. And I can't stay for the whole time tonight, but I'm happy to be here for some of it. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you. And just to give you a little background on us, GTAC, you'll hear us be called, we're the Government Transition Advisory Committee. We're a 15-member advisory committee appointed March of 2023 to serve until March of 2025. Our role is really to ensure effective and efficient implementation of charter reforms, or as much as we're allowed to, engage the public and provide strategic advice to the city. We represent diverse sectors and views, and we're united in involving Portlanders for a successful transition. We encourage all Portlanders to participate in the transition by attending our meetings, submit public comment, requesting briefings or presentations with committee members. Next slide, please. Now, in November 2022, some of you might know, Portlanders voted to change city government in 3 significant ways. First, we're going to allow voters to rank candidates in order of their preference using ranked choice voting. Instead of picking just one candidate, voters are able to rank candidates in order of preference. It's important to note that ranked choice voting eliminates the need for May primaries for city elections, which will help ensure that more Portlanders can elect councilors during one election that tends to have a higher voter turnout. Second, creating 4 new geographic districts with 3 members elected to represent each district, expanding the city council to a total of 12 members. And third, replacing the commission form of government with a city council that focuses on setting policy and a mayor elected citywide to run the city's day-to-day operations with the help of a professional city administrator. Now, most of you probably know most of this, so this is just a little bit of a review. Next slide, please. Now, the city has been working to implement the changes Portland has voted for by January 1st, 2025. Very short timeline. So implementing these changes will really fall into 2 primary areas of work: election methods and governance. And election methods, the work really includes some things we've done already, like establishing geographic districts. It was completed by the Independent District Commission in August. It also includes the administration of ranked choice voting elections and voter education, which are in progress. And it's leading up to the first elected using geographic districted and ranked choice voting in November 2024. In governance, this includes the completed work of the Independent Salary Commission that set the salaries for the future city council members, mayor, and auditor, also completed in August, and revising the council operations code to align with the mayor council form of government, which was done in September. Governance also includes some of the following items that are still being worked on, like updating the city's budget process, renovating City Hall, reviewing and revising city code, recruiting a city administrator, and future service delivery improvements, which are recommendations for the future council to consider for how city services are assessed. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, I'll wrap up really by covering districts and what you can expect for the November 2024 election. As you may know, currently our 4 city commissioners are elected at large, which means citywide, and this will change to a district system, which where 3 city council members are elected per district. Districts are geographic areas smaller than the city as a whole, and only voters within that geographic area can vote for the representatives in their district. We're now in District 3, most of you are. And as you can see on the screen, the districts are numbered. District 1 is the most eastern district. District 2 is the most northern district. 3 is inner southeast, and 4 is the most western district. And per charter amendments, all districts will be running in the November 2024 election. Mayor and councilors from District 1 and 2 will be elected 4 years, and then the auditor and councilors from 3 and 4 will be elected for 2 years. In subsequent elections, everyone will be elected 4-year terms. A district map lookup feature is currently available. Just go to portlandmaps.com and you can type in your address and you can look up what district you are, or if you know anyone who's trying to find out what district they are, that you can send it to portlandmaps.com. Next slide, please. Thank you. You've seen how simple it will be to rank candidates on the ballot. You've probably seen sample ballots at this point, but if you haven't, you can go to Portland Gov that vote 2024 to see some of those. And it's important to really highlight that ranked choice votings for city elections will begin in November 24. You won't see them before then. You'll still have a spring ballot. There's other things that will be voted on, but you won't see the ranked choice voting until November. Voter education by Multnomah County, the city, and community partners will really strategically begin in earnest after the May 2024 election, closer to when voters are expected to rank candidates for city elections. The timing is important, and it's best practice for minimizing confusion, reducing misinformation, and ensuring the success of the voter education campaign. For more information on the 2024 elections and to access all the voter education materials, like I said, you can just visit the website on the screen. It's a great resource to help you understand the voting process and how to make sure your vote counts. And also, like I mentioned before, you could reach out to us and ask for presentations of some of this. Next slide, please. And this is how you get in touch, stay in touch with the transition, and how you can reach out to us. You can request a presentation, provide public comment, sign up to receive our monthly newsletters. Just go to portland.gov/transition/engage. We'll do a presentation this is like a mini presentation that will be a lot more in depth. We can do stuff on ranked choice voting, or you could send us any questions. We're happy to answer them for you. And if you have any questions that came up today, the best thing to do is just email us at transition@portlandoregon.gov. And now I'll just pass it to our colleagues at the Office of Community and Civic Engagement to talk about the new district coalition offices.
Awesome sauce. Thank you so much, Jose. That was awesome. And Juliet, thank you so much for being here. So hopefully you folks can stick around for a little bit. I promise not to take too long and linger here with our portion of the presentation, but I'm very thankful for the information that you've shared, and I have a sneaky suspicion folks are going to have a couple questions for you. So thank you again. So I will jump right in here. Here I am. We're going to talk here about the Office of Community and Civic Life. Next slide for me, Machu. And I always like to begin with our mission statement. I think that the mission statement is the guidepost of all that folks do. And so as you see here, our mission is to connect the people of Portland with their city government to promote the common good. And our programs are here to create a culture of collaboration, expanding possibilities for all Portlanders to contribute to their knowledge, experience, and creativity to address local concerns and make truly, well, I can't see it because there is something right on top of it. I can't see the rest, but we'll be able to see it on the slide. Basically this within the city that we all share. This is a hands-on effort. We all see our communities in different ways. And so we want to make sure that we are all connected and are able to thrive within those communities. Next slide. I'd love to introduce my team that is here. I think all are here on camera, or rather not on camera, I can't see, but here you can see us. And what I think is super exciting is you'll see underneath each photo here of the team members, the respective areas. So we're going to start talking about in our new language of district language. So in District 1 out east, we have Jason Hagan. In District 2, which would be considered north and northeast, we've got currently Mary Jan Kelly, as well as Summer Money, because they're both serving North Portland at this time. And then we have Sharon Keast, who's out in Southwest, but also serving North and Northwest. Why is that important? Because we're going to move into talking about our wonderful DCO, District Coalition Office partners. And if you don't know, we have been a 7-district coalition office model, 3 of which are internal to the city and 4 have been external. And we've had our 4 for years now, and some of you may not realize that. And what we have done now is we have moved, or are moving as of July 1st, 2024, we are moving into our 4-district modeling. But we want to talk a bit about the service delivery, communication, the public relations, the engagement, the new budget, the funding updates, etc. That's what we're going to move into talking about. But I want you to see the team that is already present in the city and is currently serving and partnering also together amongst all 7 of our coalitions. Next slide. This is the 4 C's. And why do I call this a 4 C's? Well, it just spoke to me because it speaks to who we are as the Office of Civic Life, the neighborhood team. So let me go through our 4 C's. We are conveners. And what does that mean? We bring people together. We are experts at that. We are conveyors. What does that mean? Well, it means that we share what we know, who we know. We are connectors. We bring people together. We bring resolutions, solutions with where they need to go. And then we are conduits. What does that mean? It means that information flows through us, to us. We carry it onward. We come back and we connect it to where it needs to go. We bring people together in the rooms who need to meet with one another, who need to know one another, who may have that piece of the recipe that needs to go in that somebody else didn't have already on hand. So I call this the 4 C's, and I think that it speaks best to who we are as part of the neighborhood team within Civic Life. Next slide. So here, if I had a drum roll, I would do it. This is our description of our nonprofit district coalition partners. And many of you may or may not know that you have been seated within a district coalition. And where we're going now is specifically into the 4. So for District 1, we will have Central Northeast neighbors covering District 1, which remember, this is East. And I'm going to do some things that may seem redundant. What I'm trying to do, they say we need between 6 and 7 touch points to remember things. So this is new or newer language for some of us. When we're talking in this in the forms of districts. So I'm going to repeat some things over and over just so that we kind of get it embedded. So District 1, East Portland, Central Northeast Neighbors is our nonprofit who will be covering that area and who we are partnering with. And then for District 2, that is representative of part of Northeast and North Portland. That is NECN, also known as Northeast Coalition of Neighborhoods. And that is, again, you have Mary and Summer in that area currently. Then for District 3, we have Southeast Uplift, our hosts, our techies for the evening and all of the things. And we will clearly have one of our staff members placed here in District 3. And then District 4, this is Neighbors West, Northwest, joining in with Southwest and covering that whole entire area that Jose just shared on the map that he was showing. So these are our partners. These are folks that we have been working with. It's just that now we have an opportunity to work together in an even more deeper and more meaningful way. In some ways, it will be daily, if you will. In other ways, you know, as we all together face inward as we see ourselves as the Civic Life neighborhood team and Civic Life as a bureau, currently under the mayor's office and then to be moved under the city administrator's office in the new service delivery area. As we partner with Portland Solutions and we continue to align ourselves with what have been described as the priorities coming out of the mayor's office, these are the folks that you will see who are really going to take the charge of coming together and really kind of shoring up, you know, as we move forward, and working very hard to not miss out on taking care of all service delivery areas as we have been. So thank you, Achieve. So here we go again. When we look at this map, the purple lines are where we see where our newer, I'm trying to get it together here. The old lines are in purple, and then you see our new districting in the green, yellow, blue, and I'm going to call that mauve, respectfully. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit more when we think of the new service areas and we think about as we are aligning ourselves with, what have been the mayor's priorities. And when we think of our partnership also with Portland Solutions, we're looking at these areas: organizational capacity, economic prosperity, homelessness or houselessness, livability, and safety. And these are all areas that we as Civic Life, from our perspective as have being the city-run district coalition offices and our external partners, these are all areas that we've already been working in. So this is not new for us. Next slide. So this is what we're talking about, or what we're thinking of when we think of organizational capacity. What you read here on this slide are all things that we've all been doing already. So I'm going to jump right into provide training and technical assistance. We just discussed this earlier today in a work session. And one of the things that we were discussing was expanding upon a library of resources so that folks could, let's say, for instance, you need to renew or get yourself in good standing as a neighborhood association or as a nonprofit. There's proper filings that you need to do. There's proper tax work that you need to do. So we're saying not just as us as staff being able to provide that training, but even being able to train the trainer. So what we're looking at is, and that's the capacity building, right? It's like, let me not just feed you the fish, but let me also teach you to fish. And that is something that we collectively, and especially with our nonprofit organizations, have been able to do and have been doing for years, is building capacity within community. And that's something to be really excited about. Next slide. Then when we talk about economic prosperity and what does that look like and what can that look like? Well, one of the things I zero in on is the city has made a commitment to invest in community through the small grants and sponsorship program. Where our partnership is so significant with the district coalition offices that are nonprofits is that they have the ability to do some things that we as the city can't do as fast. They have the ability to deliver the small grants and sponsorships a bit faster than we can. We have a little bit more checks and balances internally that they don't. And so it makes it more friendly, if you will, for some folks. When you think about the speed of what can happen with the nonprofits. So that to me is something that's very exciting. Continuing to facilitate communication and engagement for economic growth. We can't speak enough to, you hear the buzzwords of facilitation and communication, but if you could just think about for a second how important that is to know, even for tonight's meeting. There was, some miscommunication in terms of if we were still going to be in person or not. So just tonight, I was like, wow, communication. We always have room to improve. We do have expertise around communication, and we can always improve. What else do I want to say about this slide? And of course, we want to attract business and investment opportunities. We want our communities thriving and abuzz with small business and what have you. And our small grants are things that folks can participate in. So that's exciting as well. Next slide. And then when we look at all of the collaborating that is already being done and facilitating whether it's providing shelters within neighborhoods, providing an opportunity to talk about good neighbor agreements for those sheltering locations, providing more information and communication around, well, what will that look like in our neighborhoods, and improving that, right? Always the opportunity to improve and work together. So these are things and areas where we see ourselves as being able to collaborate. So it's none of us are just kickstarting these efforts. Again, these are efforts that exist, have already been happening within both our nonprofits and as well as our city run, in terms of, again, we go back to our 4 C's: connecting, conduit, conveying, and convening. Next slide. Trying to make sure I'm doing good on time too, because I want to leave lots of room for questions, please. And then livability. So when you think of livability, it could, we all could have different definitions, but these right here, these 4 points are some of the things that we pulled out to really tease out in the mind what that can look like. So when we think about facilitating communication between residents and city services, well, what does that look like? Well, I can tell you, I had a reach out this week, and it was somebody who was looking for assistance with their Airbnb application. Now, in the Office of Civic Life, we don't actually do the application, but what I did need to do was help facilitate them finding their neighborhood contact person to put on their application. That's not something that they're going to find at 311. 311 is excellent, but there is this also this concierge type of efforts that we provide. So it's not just take a call, it's now let me go find the solution for you. And what does that mean to that person? That's part of the economic prosperity, right? That supporting of that, because that's something that has to do with what their situation is with their Airbnb. Organizing community events and activities to enhance neighborhood livability. Well, I'm going to guess we've got about 54 people on this call. I think we all know how cool it is when we have community events. They're right there in our neighborhood. They're within walking distance. We get to participate. Sometimes it's friends that we know. It's our neighbors who are putting something on, and we get to come forward, support, learn something new, find something new. This is all about getting sometimes it's the ability to learn and know your neighbor. These are all opportunities, and this is how, again, that capacity building and also increasing that livability coming together. Different projects. There's cleanup projects that happen within neighborhoods, specific neighborhoods, and what we're hoping to do is participate in these things and bring about our expertise, help streamline, help standardize, and help just really increase in efficiencies. Next slide. Safety. Safety is of top priority within our city. And so when we think about, again, how are we partnering together? Well, let's look at promoting emergency preparedness and disaster response efforts, right? It's, that sounds like, maybe that sounds like that's something up in the air. How does that, pertain to me? Well, it pertains to all of us. Just when we look at our most recent weather event and what have you, there were a lot of stories, all of the trees, that came down, the power outages. There were neighbors who were helping neighbors. Within the city, we actually have training to be part of, a larger neighborhood effort. That is something that we are able to promote. We are able to support not only folks getting the word out, but also being able to leverage city resources to help find spaces to have these trainings, and then also with our nonprofit partners being able to convene folks and kind of, again, the whole train the trainer methodology and taking that opportunity. So there's strengthening community engagement to address safety concerns. What does engagement look like? It looks like meeting one another where you're at. And that's something that we have not only with our city staff, but again, with what you have right here with your coalition offices. And then you trickle that out into the different organizations that they support as well, community organizations that they support, and then on and out into neighborhood associations and on and out into individuals. It's a ripple out effect. Next slide. So here comes now we can clearly see, and still in our same colors, I'm still going to call District 4 as in mauve, but maybe it's more of a dusky lavender. But here we wanted to talk about what is the distribution of funding? What does that look like? So as you see, what has happened here is you have a pretty even distribution of funding in the proposed budget for fiscal year 24-25. And so this is where we looked at the whole, And I would say we propose dividing it according to the whole. So some folks will say, well, is there money that's been taken away? No, this is the whole and entire budget that was proposed. This is inclusive of the small grants as well. And the goal is to be able to support each and every resident here within District 1, 2, 3, and 4. And as you see here, it does include the 5% constraint. And all of the funding is, again, the effort is to be in alignment with the new districting that we have. Again, we were formerly broken up into 7, and now we have condensed into 4. One of the things that I think that folks don't realize, or sometimes it falls off, even though you may have listened to this presentation today, right here and right now, the city staff is still present and will be supporting the efforts of each district coalition office. So we don't go away. We are part of the budgetary support, but our budgetary support is not identified. And I'm doing this because this is where I see it on my screen, is not identified specifically in the numbers that you see here. Next slide. And here are our resources. So I know there's still tons of questions. We are still driven. Our guidepost still is, we still are utilizing the ONI standards. We did want to make sure that the map tool is always there and accessible, so folks have. And part of the information when it comes to the mayor's priorities, those were driven out of the Portland Insight Survey. So please do visit that link. And, you know, hopefully some of you are ones that took that survey, because that's how a lot of this work was informed. And of course, you have our Civic Life website where we put all things Civic Life up and running, and there's our email. And that concludes my end of what I was going to share. And I'll just reach out to any other Civic Life folks to see if they wanted to pop in with anything before we do some Q&A. Murad, anybody else?
Thank you, Kim. I can see some questions in the chat, so maybe we can take those and provide some additional context as needed.
Okay, sounds good. Machu, do you want to, what format did you want to do Q&A? Do you want to populate them? Uh-oh. There we go.
Yeah, I think, well, in respect, because we heard from the GTAC crew that they need to leave early, let's try to get questions that they can answer or seem more geared towards them to start with. One question was, where to go? Someone asked, is there any thought about numbering the districts to align more closely with county districts? Or perhaps the inverse of that question too. Might the county districts more closely align with this proposed city districts?
I haven't heard any conversation around renumbering the districts at all. I think it's pretty much set at this point. So, and the county districts are very different as far as lines are concerned. So I think even making them match might even make things more confusing.
I concur.
All right, thank you. I guess I'll just sort by the most upvotes and we'll go down from there. I think that unless someone else sees a question that's pertinent to the GTAC crew. This question is, I just learned that Southeast Uplift is having a 30% reduction in funding, question mark. It seems to me that they could use more support, not less. What is happening?
I can try to reply to that one. Thanks, Machu. So the current situation, the given fiscal year we're in right now, which ends in June of 2024, the overall funding for the Southeast Uplift geographic area, keeping in mind that we are still in that 7-district coalition office model, amounts to $607,000 approximately. The reason why that number was so high this year is due to several reasons. First thing first, for the 7, district coalition offices for the very first time within Civic Life, we try to apply an equity coefficient because we had an excess of funding coming through a one-time payments or COVID relief related funds that were allocated to the city until until last fiscal year and this fiscal year, and that will not be available starting July of this year. With that being said, because Southeast Uplift and more broadly the East Portland community have been historically underserved, underfunded, and we didn't always have like a data-driven allocation of resources a while ago in the city when it came to the district coalition offices, we decided to make that move in the current exercise. Now, with the executive decision from Civic Life to align its geographic areas with the voting district maps, we no longer have to rely as much on both meeting an equity coefficient and an equality coefficient. The equality is organic because the city has been split into roughly a similar size pockets of those quadrants. We're talking anywhere between 166 all the way to 170, 172K thousand residents per district area. Therefore, when we're looking at the allocation that we're putting forward for the district coalition offices more broadly, the easiest way of approaching this is just to take that envelope and divide it by 4. Now, one might ask, what about the equity coefficient? Unfortunately, we do not decide the level of funding. We have to work with the allocated envelope given to our bureau, which is the same case for every single bureau within the city. And as a reminder, we are going through a budget constrained year. Citywide, there is a 5% decrease on every single program, every single P&L balance sheet of any given bureau. And so that's why we had to adjust. But indeed, for Southeast Uplift, the decrease is a little bit steeper because they had an artificial increase of plus 7% for the small grants, on top of the plus 15% for the small grants, and on top of the 10% of the operating budget this fiscal year. So I hope this helped a little bit clarify the difference between absolute value and actually the real level of funding for the given area.
Great, thank you. The next question says, even though funding is distributed equally to the new district coalitions based on population, this means that neighborhood associations and coalition districts 2 and 4 will be half as likely to receive a communications grant as in neighborhood association districts 1 and 3, because there are almost twice as many neighborhood associations in districts 2 and 4, 62 combined, than in 1 and 3, 33 combined. NAs, not individuals, apply for communication grants, need insurance, get staffing support from coalitions, basing the funding of a coalition on the number of individuals rather than the number of associations means that NAs will struggle to exist with the proposed funding. Can the funding for the NAs be reconsidered to be more equitable between NAs?
Thanks, Matthew. I think we already answered that question and through the first reply. I'm not sure if that was pretty much kind of like the metrics relied on previously, but again, we're not waiting for the next fiscal year. This is something that is already in place. The funding allocations and envelopes, if we're really serious about equality, equity, and pretty much just like a fair distribution of allocation, cannot be based on specifically on one type of engagement channel, which can be the neighborhood association or a community-based organization, or sometimes just an aggregation of volunteers without a particular incorporation. Rather, we rely, being a public administration and a public agency leveraging taxpayer money, we rely on the demographic reality of the field. So the number of organizations affiliated, regardless of their incorporation type, does not necessarily impact the funding going to that given area.
And thank you. And just a reminder, folks, please upvote comments to get those comments to the top, because we'll be going down based on the number of upvotes. Next question. Coalition funding insurance for associations is the single most important service they do. If insurance funding stops, many associations will fold. The city Civic Life should require coalitions to fund insurance. What will happen?
So this is a great question, actually, because this is something very true. And this is something that the city had to look into way before the ongoing transition or the ongoing strategic decision of rethinking the mapping of the district coalition offices. It has been actually confirmed as of last fiscal year citywide per recommendations coming from the controller's office and the CFO's office that the city should not necessarily engage in insurance-related transactions for liability reasons, because it's a little bit difficult to separate the liability exposure at the bureau level versus the citywide level. And therefore, our office has already started relying on the precious network of stakeholders and partners to convey that service and make sure that there's no disruption of the neighborhood's activities, because without insurance coverage, most likely there's a lot of event cancellation. And so I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot here, but I would love actually for Nancy to explain how you're already covering way more organizations than what pertain only to your current geographic area.
No, we just cover the organization that we currently our insurance extends to just neighborhood associations in our district, in the current district.
Sorry, we have Darlene and Allison on the call. So this is something that we're doing. We have 4 partners this year and we're moving next year, keeping the same partners. Indeed, Southeast Uplift being in the current map is still big and taking care only of its jurisdiction, but maybe Allison or Darlene, sorry again for putting you on the spot here, but if you don't mind, pretty much just explaining how your insurance assistance to the community-based organization, be it neighborhood associations or other, already goes beyond your geographic limit to be inclusive of the future district limits.
Yeah, you put me on the spot. I wasn't expecting to be seen or heard tonight.
Sorry about that.
I'm not sure exactly the question that you're asking. We were asked by the city to take on insurance for the Southwest neighborhoods because we will be the district coalition in District 4. And of course, the Southwest neighborhoods are part of District 4. So we immediately stepped up to do that. We also only are providing insurance to neighborhood associations, and we have one business association that we cover in the Southwest and one organization that serves the neighborhood that's been covered by insurance for forever. We also needed to make sure that all of the neighborhoods were right with the Secretary of State and had their CT-12s filed. And these were requirements really, not just from Neighbors West Northwest, but also this was information that was requested by the insurance agencies themselves. And I'm not sure I answered your question exactly.
But you detailed already kind of like all the efforts that has been put in place, and this is pretty much what I wanted to highlight, because I started answering this question by saying that technically the city can no longer transact in insurance coverage for extensive liability reasons, and so thanks to the partners that already stepped up this fiscal year before even moving into next year's model, we were able to avoid a disruption of coverage per the concern expressed in that question. Now, more specifically around the funding and the reimbursement of the insurance cost, the funding allocations are usually comprehensive. When we sign the grant agreements, it's specific to operating budget for the given nonprofits and the small grants and sponsorship envelope, pretty much the money dedicated to go out to the community. With that being said, it doesn't mean that there are like further transactions back and forth between Civic Life or the city more broadly, and those 4 nonprofits to cover some other items that were not necessarily included for liability reasons in those agreements. We can always amend, we can always adjust, and we can always rely on that network. And beyond kind of like the liability aspect here, to fully answer your question, Alan, the fact that we're going through the partners allows us to be much more leaner in terms of kind of like being in continuous contact and being in continuous touch with those more grassroots organizations that need even further special care and attention to comply with the requirements needed for insurance coverage.
Great, thank you. The next question says, I'm concerned that proposed funding is insufficient for DCOs to meet the moment as we shift to a new form of government in Portland. Sorry, didn't quite read that exactly, but can you please explain your expectations on how Southeast Uplift will continue to deliver our work with the cut in resources provided?
Again, this is pretty much, I think it's important to remind our guests tonight of the way the city allocates budget and pretty much how a bureau make those decisions. The reality is that there were like a couple of budget memos that were released back in November and then again in December, outlining pretty much the budget guidance for each bureau and how we will be managing money comes the next fiscal year. Those memos started from a really broad point, insisting on the decrease in revenue at the county level with the loss of $1 billion in direct revenue at the county level where our city resides. And on top of that, there is another demographic reality. The net deficit in terms of population, we're losing folks pretty much in our city. So that was kind of like the starting point from those that budget recommendation or that budget memo. Now, fast forward to concretely what it means for each bureau. I already mentioned that meant a 5% constraint throughout every single activity that we're doing, programmatic related activities. That also means that we have less wiggling room somehow if we manage to have some excess, because any additional identified assets or pretty much funding will need to be discussed to solve some of the key financial issues that are arising in the future service areas that are kickstarting in July and fully working with the expanded form of government comes January 2025 and again the following fiscal year. And so this year has been very new from a back-end perspective. The community might not be aware of it, but for the very first time in the history of the Portland budget exercise, for this requested budget season, we had to work with a given allocation for our number, but we presented everything in the perspective of a consolidated budget for the newly established service area. As a reminder, Civic Life falls within a new service area, which is pretty much the division of the future city administrator. And one can already start anticipating in the very near future that it's no longer going to be the Office of Community and Civic Life. It will be one single bureau composed of the Office of Community and Civic Life, the Office of Equity and Human Rights, the Office of Government Relations, the constellation or the myriad of programs coming from Portland Solutions, and as well some new senior positions that have been added in this new form of operational government, including the Equity Senior Officer, the Communication Senior Officer, Engagement, and Sustainability. All of that to say that the city is still expecting a lot of expenses. There's still a lot of budgetary alignment that needs to happen one step above the level of the bureaus. The numbers that we put forward are based on the allocation that was given to us. And again, just to put into perspective the financial hardship that we're talking about, our requested budget one season ago led to led to pretty much a submission of about like $40 million. We're looking at $6.8 million. We're looking at more than 46% decrease in terms of budget and 37% decrease in terms of workforce transferred out because of some of these alignments that started already a few months back. So that is why there's so much pressure on the envelopes, and that is why there's absolutely not much room in terms of looking at increasing those fundings unless we go through the city council path and there is like an ask from the community, or there's a political decision to dig deeper into that deficit to allocate money to a specific program or a given program.
Great. I think that's a great segue to this next question. How much of the Bureau funding is Civic Life being asked to contribute towards Portland Solution, whose current funding is expiring?
There's no ask per se. We're looking at it pretty much in a through a collaborative lens. So, and those are elements that will be included in the requested budget to be published by the city budget office in the upcoming weeks. The cutoff for the requested budgets for all bureaus and consolidated service area for the sake of our community is tomorrow. So we should expect those to be published anytime starting next week and following weeks. Now, going back to the question, there was no funding transfer. We did some realignment around the vacancies that were available. We've been understaffed, and we also had some vacancies that we couldn't fill because of the continuous realignment, operational and strategic within the city triggered by the transition. Now that we're pretty much like done with our requested budget submission, the final number will be the transfer of 2 vacancies to Portland Solution during this requested budget exercise that will come on top of 2 already transferred vacancies back in the fall bump, which is Q4 of 2023. So a total of 4 positions vacant.
The next question says, can the coalition contracts have a requirement that the coalitions fund in a insurance? Or was that, I feel like that was already answered. Nancy.
Rod, would you mind just clarifying? Did I just hear that you say that 4 vacancies within the Civic Life Bureau are going to fund Portland Solutions staff? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, yes and no, because like the reality is we do it like it's called like a decision package. So it's not 4. We already started looking at realignment. Civic Life started this work as early as January. So that's how like the Cannabis Bureau was transferred out to BDS. That's how we saw like some other chapters being moved out and pretty much kind of like taking away anything licensing and revenue generating to really focus on engagement and community. So in that same spirit, we organically saw some vacancies that were kind of like the collateral of those operational moves. So before even actually getting into the budgetary exercise, Civic Life started talking about alignments. And so we had some strategic alignments back in November with Portland Solution. And we also have some other alignments with the Office of Management and Finance around the grant and the RFP process. Those conversations have been going over and over again. Now, fast forward to the requested budget submission exercise. Yes, we are transferring out 2 positions to our service area to be consolidated within Portland Solution or not. Again, I think the sooner we move into the consideration that the city administrator, it will be a full bureau on its own. That's just another way of saying service area. The better we will kind of like understand those needed alignments, and we will be more de-siloed, and we won't look at it as if it was competitive funding, but more as a shared mandate, and we are all focused on the service deliveries for the community.
And just to know, did promote the rest of the neighborhoods team up here onto the panel. My apologies. So we can all say hello to you all, or Civic Life can. Just remember, keep uploading those things. It helps get things to the top of the queue. So we answer the most pressing questions that you all want to hear answered by Civic Life. I think we answered this, but just in case, can the coalition contract have a requirement that coalitions fund NA insurance?
Kim and our partners, do you want to take on that? Since you're working currently on the scope of works.
Well, we absolutely are currently working on those scope of works, and it kind of segues back to a question that you were already answering regarding whether it's staff at Southeast Uplift. Again, we have 4 of our nonprofit partners that all are thinking about their staffing and how to leverage, and that's part of what we will be doing as the city staff, is to help find those resources, find the efficiencies, figure out what it is. Is there a city resource that we might have? We talked about utilizing licenses, etc., that will help to shore up and maintain current service deliveries without missing a beat and keeping a continuum. As it relates to the insurance process, we see ourselves going forward to continue to do the general liability, the D&O insurance. We see that definitely being able to be something, and part of our work would be to help with that processing. Does anybody else want to add to that? Nancy or Darlene or Allison? I just saw Allison on this.
Well, I'm happy to hold on. I'm happy to chime in that the current contracts have required that we provide general liability insurance. They have not required that we provide directors and officers insurance. And so at least in the time that I've been at Southeast Uplift, we have shared when the board has approved our budget that the D&O insurance for neighborhood associations boards is at the discretion of the Southeast Uplift board, because it is not something that we're required to do. So I think I already heard from I think Murad and Kimberly, you both addressed that, like, you don't want to put in our contracts a mandate to provide insurance. So if that's not correct, please correct me. But in terms of, as we Southeast Uplift face a 31% budget cut, we're going to have to make really hard decisions about what we can afford to fund and do. So yeah.
I would like to chime in here too. Thank you, Machu, for unmuting me on this subject again. This goes to, again, the metric of 170,000 people per, when we have 30 plus neighborhoods that we would look to be providing insurance for. I'm just wondering, can the city fund us an additional stipend for the insurance? So that is sort of an equalizer, because I'm going to spend a lot more of my budget on insurance than a coalition with the same amount of people in it is spending on half the number of neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thanks, Darlene and Nancy. I think that historically, insurance is definitely part of one of those requirements needed when we're talking about like neighborhood activities, and doing without it is, we know for a fact that that will compromise like the roster of events on any given like district coalition area. With that being said, the reality of the numbers, again, those are not decisions that we're making randomly, or there is no real choice here. It is a budget constraint. That is a reality. What we can do, Darlene, and what we can recommend is pretty much kind of like have an approach similar to what Nancy mentioned. As far as we know that for certain activities, and we used to do that actually for our small grants, when we have grantees, recipients, we have insurance coverage requirements in order to get the funds related to that small grant or sponsorship through the city. Very often, we request or we have those grantees requesting like waivers to decrease the liability amount or to offset one type of insurance. You don't need, for instance, auto insurance if you're not using any form of transportation. Little tweaks like that. The only thing that we can guarantee and we can commit to, Darlene, is that we're gonna sit together. We're gonna identify those bottlenecks and try to come up with solutions together. But as far as the authority of increasing the funding, that is not something that we unfortunately have as a bureau.
Can I add one more thing to that?
Yes, please.
Hi. I just wanted to say that also probably everyone is aware that insurance costs are increasing and throughout the country. And this is a fact. And when we were asked to cover neighborhoods in East, the costs are definitely going up. And so when we start our new contract this year, we can expect a pretty good increase in those two types of insurance. And so the funding that we're getting not only covers the small grants, but it will also be covering the insurance. And that's a huge expense. Now, the city is self-insured, so that's different. The city doesn't carry their own insurance like we have to carry, and the neighborhoods are required to carry. And for as long as I've been in the neighborhood system, the coalitions have always provided the liability insurance. And more recently, we've covered the directors and officers insurance. So I know that this is something that we as organizations would like to keep on doing. And so I do hope that there is a way for us to find like a small amount of money in the budget to cover this, but it is going to be a huge amount for us because the costs have increased. And I just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
Thank you, Allison. I think IC wants to react to that.
Rod, do you want to take a question, just audio one from the crowd?
Well, IC is actually one of our colleagues, so I think she's going to react to Allison's input. Yeah.
Let me just add you on. All right, you should be able to speak. My apologies.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Great. I would just like to add to that is it is true that the city is self-insured, but only for workers' comp insurance. Liability is we still need to purchase from a third party, and although I don't know the exact increase at the moment, but it has increased a lot over the last year or two. And just want to share that we share the same sentiment as you with the insurance costs rising.
And one of the solutions that was explored, I believe, when the city was still able to transact an insurance, and maybe that's something we should look into through the nonprofit effort when we get together, is bundling the insurance policy. I do believe that was the plan for the city-run coalitions to decrease cost, or at least like absorb some of that cost versus going at it, because as we all know, when each entity or neighborhood associations or like community organization try to get that premium on their own, usually the cost is not as fiscally responsible.
And I also want to add that we do have the 5% reduction number, and how it worked is that, like Murad said, at the beginning of the budget development process, we're given a budget number that is already assigned to us, and we need to work within that. This year, the number came to us less 5%. The 5% is $375,000. $375,291. So it already came with that deducted from our number. So we had to work within what we received.
Cool. Thanks for the additional details. There's a question or a comment. The level of community impacted by coalition areas is not equal, so the cuts should not apply as a one-size-fits-all. Because Southeast Uplift has such a huge reach on not just associations, but also includes small Black, Indigenous, people of color-led groups, projects, and provides technical support, how is this approach justifying being more equitable? It seems like it would disable marginalized groups who have been receiving crucial support from Southeast Uplift.
So I think it's important before I fully dive into the answer of that question, it's important to kind of like identify the source of our data. How do we know that we have so many people in that given area? And how do we know, like typically with the question asked, how do we measure actually like the level of hardship or kind of like the percentage of underserved groups or BIPOC resident and such? So we have the data. So that is actually the great starting point. That is something that started a couple of years ago, and the Civic Life has been working hand in hand with PSU and their data research center to make sure that we get the most comprehensive set of data on our residents and on Portlanders by neighborhoods, by district coalition office area, by district area, and at a macro level. And so we know exactly actually what is the rate of the different ethnicities within every single neighborhood, within every single district coalition area, and the future districts. But again, and as mentioned by IC, this is not a matter of we are voluntarily deciding to not push the allocations to the point of being as much as possible inclusive of all the possible equitable lenses. This is a budgetary constrained year, and we get a number and we work with that number. So the dilemma and how the decision was made, and this is actually the logical path when we're looking at implementing any form of DEI. We need to have some form of equality. And then the next step is moving to equity, because there's no equity if that was the case, for instance, as recently as 2 or 3 fiscal years ago. And that's what we did. When we had the excess, it is currently happening. That's why Southeast Uplift has, on average, about almost $300,000 more than any other nonprofit run coalition office this current fiscal year, because the number that was given to us allowed us to not only establish equality, which is that step 0, the most basic one, and then we started looking at adding an equity coefficient. And then if we had like even more funding, we can go as far as getting more sophisticated into the allocation and dictate the usage of the funds, or at least like the purpose. We know, for instance, that what is the rate of disability? What is the rate of home ownership versus rent burden? What are the level of economic prosperity? What are the level of incomes? So one might think that indeed, when the funds are available, and since we have the precise data from a reputable partner, that can be like the next logical step. It's just that the financial reality of the city doesn't allow for that as of now. And I want to really highlight that. I really invite everybody to do a deep dive into the budget office release documents to really see where we're standing on a macro level rather than just kind of like at the Civic Life level. There are like some really important piece of information over there. For instance, there will be no new funding at the city level until 2029. There will be no more one-time payments starting next fiscal year. Just a fiscal year ago, this city had about $250 million between the COVID federal fund reliefs and between the one-time payments allowed. We had an extra $250 million as an organization to take care of our programs. We lost that. we lost the revenue at the county level. We're losing people. And on top of that, we have like the 5% constraint. So again, sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I'm just kind of like really trying to outline the entire process so that our guests understand how some of these decisions are being made. Sometimes they're not decisions. There are pretty much forced decisions to be made.
Thank you. I think this is a good opportunity to kind of zoom out, step back, and you've kind of highlighted that. In the district model update, the communication that went out from Civic Life was saying that this equal distribution of funds is so we can better serve Portlanders. Can you elaborate upon that and like kind of what that vision is and how we get there from where we are today going into this new model? I think that might help kind of give a big picture perspective on things.
Yeah, so as mentioned by Kim already, there are like a few reasons to pretty much move into this new model. And the first one, which is really from just like a community satisfaction perspective, relying on nonprofit partners allow the service delivery to be much faster. And there's less bureaucratic considerations. There's less steps to comply with. And a telling example, we discussed it for quite some time tonight, is the insurance. Because of all the liabilities, matters, and so on, it's so much more easier for our partners to do so. So there is this ease of business and also decrease of complexity. We technically want to live in a city where we don't want folks to have to think between, oh, I should be voting in that district and I should be going to the other district to request whatever type of neighborhood services I'm entitled to have. The second reason is purely fiscal responsibility. In such constrained financially year, it absolutely did make sense to look at which one was more cost effective. And again, because we are a public administration, because we have like some institutional costs that we do carry, and the way we do our accounting and the way we conduct our balance sheets, it is obviously much more cost effective to go through those nonprofits. And finally, yeah, it's just kind of like, sorry. And
I think Allison might be unmuted.
So it's pretty much for both financial, fiscal reasons, but also for kind of like resident satisfaction and speed of execution, delivery of services.
Great. Thanks so much for like kind of grounding us in what we're talking about here. There is a question here, and from Stacy, just saying clarification. Even though the city isn't paying for insurance directly through the DCOs, is the city providing the funding for insurance for the coalitions to pay?
Yes and no, it depends. Because as I said, so there are like, we had to adjust because of that new reality of no longer being able to transact into insurance. So as mentioned, for instance, by Nancy, Southeast Uplift is taking care of their current geographic area, and they have this discretionary decision making. When we had pretty much to rely on other partners such as Allison and Darlene to cover groups that currently resides outside of their given jurisdictions, yes, the city actually do cover that.
Next one, my concern is the decrease of funding will end up dismantling the associations because small associations are 100% dependent on receiving insurance, fiscal sponsorship, communication funds, grants, fee reimbursements, etc. from the district coalitions. I don't see how the DCOs will be able to properly operate and support associations with the new budget.
It is a challenge for everybody. It is a challenge definitely for our partners, the nonprofits. It is also a challenge for us. And the only thing that we can do is try to meet Portlanders' desire as expressed during the charter reform, seeing an expanded form of government, seeing like a more professional way, better managed back end at the operational level. We have between now all the way until June 30th of this year to sit down with our partners and just try to find those financial bottlenecks, those optimizations, budget items, to mitigate as much as possible this feeling that you just expressed.
Next question, can Civic Life commit to setting coalition staff for your fiscal year 24 through 2025 line item budget in its entirety by the end of day tomorrow?
Sorry, I'm not sure to understand the question, Matthew.
The question is that can Civic Life commit to sending to the district coalitions your fiscal year 24-25 line item budget in its entirety, I guess by the end of the week is how I'm interpreting that question.
What line of item budget are we talking about here?
I think for the next fiscal year, if I'm understanding the question correctly.
The numbers included on the slide will be the numbers that we will be requesting. Again, this is not a Civic Life decision. This is a public administration where we have a budgetary exercise. As a bureau, we are given an allocation, and then we draft a strategic plan based on that number provided in the allocation. And then this is a democratic city, and we have elected officials. We take that strategic requested budget and vision, and we submit it the same way every single other bureau. And now the newly established service areas, we submit it to City Council for review, for a broader, more comprehensive analysis in the context of economic hardship or economic surplus. And then there is a budget that is adopted and communicated back to the respective bureaus. The very same time those informations are being made available to the community. I will ask my team here to maybe make sure to provide as much resources as possible from the budget office, and more specifically both links to the requested budget pages and also the adopted budget pages, so that our guests can kind of like see where those information will be available and get a little bit more familiarized with that process.
Terrific. Thank you. The next question is from Darlene. Darlene, do you just want to ask it? I think you have the ability to unmute. I could start the question. It says some coalitions will be buying insurance for 31 associations, and some will be purchasing insurance for 15. One issue related to the using the number of people as the only metric versus number of orgs served per coalition district. It sounds like just costs could perhaps be higher, is I think what the points. Sorry, should I interpret?
Sorry, Matthew, can you repeat what was the question ultimately?
I think it was just saying like the issue of providing insurance to, okay, go ahead, Darlene.
It was actually just something that has already been discussed, so we don't even have to go through the question. It was really the question that I got to ask out loud. You know, the metric of people versus organizations and how we do our business is not fair. Not fair. Using population as the only metric doesn't necessarily work for us. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thanks, Darlene. Next question, Murad, you said earlier that you would have to go to City Council to request more funding if there's enough people wanting this. So what's the next step for this? Because the questions are showing that there is a great deal of concern that the proposed funding level will greatly impact the DCOs and NAs. Question mark.
I will advise to connect with City Council for question related to the democratic process and the democratic exercise of our respective rights and duties. This is not something that is part of my mandate personally. I am just a bureaucrat. I am not in the business of politics. But yes, as a reminder, again, like the process is pretty straightforward. The elected officials do have the final say in terms of taking all the requested budgets, analyzing them, usually around January or February of any given calendar year, and then they have the opportunity to release an adopted budget tweaked to their liking or absolutely untamed, depending on, again, their preferences, sometimes anywhere between May, June, July at the latest. So I will advise getting in touch actually with City Council directly if that's an avenue that some of our guests would like to explore.
Yes.
All right, I guess we'll look forward to it. Next question says, who decides how much of the budget goes towards community small grants? Is it the DCOs or Civic Life?
Sorry, I'm not sure to understand that one. I'm not sure. Can you just repeat it?
Yeah, the small grants programs that we're discussing that the districts will administer. How much of that budget is determined by the district coalition office itself or Civic Life? I think is my understanding of the question.
Historically, the grant agreements have been drafted with a predefined operating budget number and a predefined small grant number. I'm not sure if that is something that will be there's certainly like discussions citywide level as far as because the city sometimes lack proper processes. This is not necessarily a Civic Life thing, but we're talking more broadly about like procurement, requests for proposals, mechanisms, and also pretty much so covenants and financial ratios and scope of works and pretty much deliverables within any given contracts. Here we're speaking about grants. The universal standards when it comes to grant making, which is what we want to get to at some point. And I feel like I'm speaking on behalf of the entire city here, which I shouldn't be doing, will most likely lead us to sharp request for proposal mechanism being put in place in a very near future, because that's not something that necessarily exists right now in a concerted way. We still see a lot of silos. And one can assume that the next step in that professionalization of services will be to have an established ratio between operating budget versus small grants. It is usually acceptable on the federal side and on kind of like the public administration side. I'm not sure about like municipal. We're talking anywhere 15 to 25, 30% to go out to the community, and the remainder going to the operating budget, depending on the level of requirements, reimbursement programs, and so on, and the size of the respective pipelines.
The next question says, what makes you, or Nancy, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify the numbers that were shown on the slide. That was the funding for the district coalition office. Typically in a year, we receive base funding and then a separate number that is for the community small grants program. All of the district coalitions put 100% of those resources directly right back into the community. So we're not we're not taking anything from those numbers to administer these grant programs. But the number that you saw on the slide earlier includes all of the funding that we'll get. And so we're just, I think that question was sort of to like how much of that will be for the community small grants program, because that's clarity that we need if we're going to administer a program in the next fiscal year. But it includes both, so it's like a double whammy hit for our
and again, like everything is work in progress, Nancy. As we're talking right now, we're still working on the scope of works, and nothing has been decided as far as pretty much that split. There's always kind of like a different perspective, different take on that question. I fully understand and actually can relate to the community needs, but I also can relate to the folks that do not have to deal with the human aspects, and they're pretty much just putting some budgetary constraint on us and looking at it, and pretty much also from their end saying that like, yeah, maybe that ratio should be revised. I don't think there's a right or good way of going about it. I think the most important thing is to keep working together to come up with a tangible solution, something that is sustainable and healthy from an operating budget for the partners without impacting too much the final amounts that go directly to the community.
All right, we have time for like 1 to 2 more questions. So I'm just going to throw a few to the top. What about the district's taking on more neighborhoods, will the MPO be provided with enough resources to build capacity to serve those neighborhoods effectively? Or do you feel like you kind of spoke to that quite a bit, Rod?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This one, Zach, says the numbers of the Bureau's proposed budget does not break itself down on program area and cost items, for example, personnel. That would be greatly helpful to understand how much Civic Life's personnel budget is going to support the DCOs versus pass-through dollars with small grants and contracts. I guess, any comment there?
Yeah, so I can give you like the personnel cost for the scenic group. It's $954,000. And now again, the numbers we saw during the presentation, the number I just gave around the personnel cost, those are included, those are part of our plans, and this is why we're here tonight sharing those with the community. That does not necessarily equate to the adopted numbers comes June or July of this year, because that decision does not reside with Civic Life once again.
How many FTE is that 954,000?
There's IC, do you want to help me on that one, please? If you have access to the numbers.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I believe it is 6 FTE.
Okay, thank you. I guess one last question.
And also, when our requested budget is available, we will make it available to our program, to our DC, to our DCO coordinators if our community partner questions relating to that. And also, once the city budget office receive all of the requested budget from all the bureaus, they will also publish that on their website as well.
Great, thank you. I guess one last question. What was it? Where to go? It says the financial reality of the state doesn't allow for equity, question mark.
Sorry, Machu, say that again.
The question says the financial reality of our city doesn't allow for equity. Like, does it not allow for equity?
No, because like it's not as budget constraints happen all the time. So this is not something, it's not the first time, and it's definitely not going to be this last. But just like at the macro level, there are like some years where there are like some budgetary excess, allowing us to go the extra mile for the aspects that do not provide any return on investment. When we have years like the one we're about to tackle, and actually even like cycles, because this is going to be a multi-year situation, is just pretty much like less wiggling room to implement some of those same initiatives. And there is like a little bit more focus than usual around like return on investment. The issue that we have here is that like we are a community-driven bureau, and our mandate is really to connect Portlanders with city government and act the 4 C's mentioned by Kimberly and so on. So obviously we feel the hit a little bit more. If we were a revenue generating bureau, we will have had a little bit more wiggling room to be creative and associate some of the generated revenue towards a continuous push of equity and keep increasing the investments. What has been accomplished this year, last year, and also kind of like moving into this equality form before tackling again equity, those are substantial. It's substantial progress. The city most likely didn't have a proper metric-driven approach 10 or 20 years ago, and that was a real expression of inequality, of lack of equity, and so on. Since a lot has been done, equity is centered as one of our core values. Is just that the money is a little bit more challenging this time, but it doesn't mean that we're dropping the ball.
So got a message from the Civic Life crew that are trying to like wrap up the Q&A part. So I guess thank you so much for this update and taking these questions. I
Absolutely.
do want to pass it to Nancy, Director of Southeast Uplift, for any wrapping up remarks and before we pass it back to you all.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to point out that the webinar goes until 8. So if there's more presentation, then we can do it. But if there's not, then we can keep going.
Yeah, Kimberly, did you want to tie things up or kind of summarize things here? Is that where we're at in tonight's event?
Yeah,
Or do
sure.
we have
So
time for more questions? Either or.
I think in summary, you know, I certainly hear and you know, you've been speaking with Murad, you know, who's the director for Civic Life. I think one of the things that we want to continue to highlight is, you know, there is us, the scenic team. Then there's the broader spectrum of the Office of Community and Civic Life as a whole that is inclusive of our business operations, our immigrant and refugee program, our equity and advisory boards program. We are all working synergistically with the changes that have come. One of the things that I am looking at is the resilience that city workers as well as our nonprofits have gone through a number of changes, and we all have, you know, just even touching back to the pandemic. And so is there something on the table that looks challenging or presents wondering? Absolutely. But I believe that collectively we are able to do the hard. And we're able to do the hard together. And I believe that we're going to continue to find solutions. That's what we've been doing. That's what we've been doing as our individual entities. And that's what we are doing and growing to do together more and more collectively. We literally, as I stated earlier, just worked on a continuum of work session. And we will continue to do those to build out these efficiencies and find different ways of connecting and other resources, even to shore up wherever we may find gaps. And I think that's part of the exercise as a whole that we are doing to prepare for July 1st. And I think we're going to be all the better and all the stronger moving forward for sure.
Well, thank you so much all for coming out tonight. Really appreciate your time and taking all these questions. As just a reminder of folks, we will send all the questions that are still remaining here to the Civic Life team and hope to get that out to you. And thanks for joining in tonight. I think we're just about to wrap up here. Nancy.
I see there's still some questions that weren't answered. So I think this webinar was supposed to go till 8. So is it possible to see if we can get through a few more of the questions in the Q&A?
If we're able to consolidate some of them, if there's something that isn't, there's been some, and we're happy to answer repeat questions. And maybe we, by the time we get done with our fourth and final next week session, we'll be able to maybe even do an FAQ page and what have you to address some of those.
This one's kind of interesting question. Will all coalitions be organized and treated in the same manner? And
I hear
Darlene
Darlene
laugh.
chuckling. I'll let Darlene take that one.
I heard you, Darlene, on that one. The answer
me,
is yes.
Matu. Mute me.
The answer is yes, hopefully. There is no reason to not go about it. Is there like a follow-up question to that? I'm not sure. Maybe I missed.
I think it's kind of a complex question, right? Because each DCO board will determine their own composition, right? And like Civic Life can't necessarily dictate that.
No, Civic Life is not dictating anything to begin with, besides kind of like when it comes to the funding and the relationship with the funding. Actually, things are dictated through the ONI standards, and that is kind of like pretty much the reference stack used by the district coalition offices and the entire ecosystem, including neighborhoods associations and such. So when it comes to the compositions of boards, neighborhoods associations boards, directors and officers, and so on, that will be actually the deciding factor rather than civic life. As far as we're concerned, again, we are public officers. We operate leveraging taxpayer money. So we work for the entire community, and there is no favoritism or kind of like working more with this entity versus the other one, or more with this Portlander resident versus the other one.
And just for everyone, yes, we can upload these slides and get them out to you all.
Thank you for that, Machu, for sure. Is there anything else that we didn't cover, a topic?
There is this question I don't think we've really discussed. Maybe other community orgs should benefit from insurance and corporate filings too. And like service to the residents of the district, for example.
Yes, if the financial means are there, absolutely, we want to be inclusive, but I'm not sure what type of organization we're talking about. Again, if the affiliation is coming through the ONI standards, so if they qualify as part of the neighborhood district coalition offices or district coalitions ecosystem, or if we're talking broader nonprofits getting funding from the city, which is a different question here.
And then I think we've kind of touched around this in a way, but the question was like, with the budget cut, what does that mean for communication grants? Or I think this might be referred to as like communication CAF or communication funds, which are our primary fund to produce our neighborhood newsletter.
You mean community activity funds?
Exactly. I think we in Southeast Uplift refer to as communication funds.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about the dealing of the respective nonprofits, CAFs or community activity funds. For the ones that we started like internally through the 3 city-run coalitions, this is actually one of the envelopes we will be tapping into to make sure that we get as much money out to the 4 partners attending with us tonight. In the same vein, we will not have like a delivered small grant and sponsorship program, so we can take that $150,000 envelope that we auto-regulate currently, even this fiscal year, through the city-run coalition offices, and we will make that available to the 4 nonprofits to mitigate a little bit the 5%. Those are one of the factors that we try to use pretty much to get as much money out as possible.
Next question is, this is assuming we are not using an equitable lens. We are not looking for census data. We are looking for actual work in progress in Southeast Portland communities. I guess any comment there?
What type of work specifically?
I think they're speaking to outcomes, like positive outcomes for like people.
Positive outcomes. I think we need to take this a little bit outside of the neighborhood ecosystem, because we talk a lot about like neighborhood associations and such, and I hear a lot of words like equity, equality, and such, and nobody actually is really talking about like the composition of the demographics. And we had like a question specifically around that, and that's when I pretty much started mentioning the source of our data. It's not only about pretty much the districts or kind of like the functionings, the services, the insurance. Also, it starts with the individual. And while we are definitely facing some challenging times from a budgetary perspective, there are some things to celebrate as a community. There are some things to celebrate as champions of engagements, champions of inclusion and equity. For instance, in the midst of everything going on, we were able to not sunset some important programs, such as the Immigrant and Refugee Program. And as a matter of fact, because of a newly found support from City Council and from Commissioner Ryan, when we were working under, when we were reporting to Commissioner Ryan, we had a very successful welcoming week. And the city will formally announce additional services for the new Portlanders that are an essential component of our respective neighborhoods, district coalition offices, and so on. There are also like a lot of discussions much needed around another big chapter we have within the Bureau, the advisory body committees. The city has about like 115 committees. Every single bureau has a few. We can talk about like PBOT, about parks, about civic life, the budgetary advisory committees, and so on. Something that has been overlooked because of the amount of change required during this city transition was the adjustment of those committees through the transition. And we had some pretty interesting sessions around those budgetary advisory committees, because the reality is that it did somehow impact the participatory nature of those aggregations. All of that to say is like, there are like, this is a comprehensive, there's a total revamp of the city. And it will become more and more challenging to tackle like very specific points at any given point in time, because we need to do all of this back end, all of this adjustment work. We're trying to do it with the least amount of disruption possible on the communities. But I think that we also need to be pragmatic when there's less money, when there's so many changes, when there's so many realignments in the programs, in the budget, in the way we operate, in the way we want to start delivering funding. Everything is happening at the same time. So we will see a lot of headaches, we will see a lot of bottlenecks, but pretty much the message we want to leave here, and Kimberly has been mentioning that, we are here working together. The partners that are here with us tonight on the call, we have that commitment to work together. And I truly hope that we will reach a level of collaboration where we are both convinced that this is not some type of bureau budgetary action to shield some funding and prevent the community from receiving it, or the nonprofits. We are really stretched to the maximum here, and we are really willing to work as much as possible to keep identifying those optimization points, because we all care about the same thing, the residents.
Awesome. Thank you for that explanation. My name is Maria, and I worked for the coalition office for quite a few years. I am a Black queer woman who worked with many communities of color while at Southeast Uplift, and also while serving on the board, and also am part of an organization that's fiscally sponsored, and my day job is within the Southeast Coalition area. So I think it's important to understand that when things are really done equitably, it's more of a collaborative, it's like a co-created, it's a collaborative model. So even though there is a group creating changes, there's still the people who are directly impacted by those changes. And I think it's unfair to assume that only neighborhood associations or only like a specific kind of people live in Southeast Portland or are impacted by coalition changes. I think that's a very it's a slippery slope. So I wouldn't just, make assumptions or make statements that sound like things are only impacting specific communities, because that isn't true. So I just wanted, so some of those statements, and like the statement that was read, was really around that, because Southeast Uplift does have a very large impact. And when you look at the impact of neighborhood coalitions, not the census data of who lives where, but who's actually utilizing the services and the services that are provided, you will find that Southeast Uplift has always been extremely progressive and has always worked very hard to include other folks, including like being an organization that won a national award to do anti-racist work. There's a lot of work that Southeast Uplift that has done over the years that happened before many of the folks who work at Civic Life today were at Civic Life. And so many of us on this call, we're very well versed in Civic Life. We're very well versed in PBOT. We're very well versed in budget. So I would just ask that you and your team just really consider that we're not starting at, square one, even though some folks are. And that's how to keep things accessible, is to make things like as simple as possible so that it's accessible for everyone. But when we are pushing and asking for answers, I just want to be clear that not everyone who receives services or support from Southeast Uplift is from the communities that you see, or you're assuming like through the census, or that you're thinking because it's Southeast Portland.
No, and that makes sense. And I appreciate kind of like the background provided. You are not new to this. I am new to this. We are new with Kimberly to this. And when we came in, a lot of our actually staff is fairly new, because if you've been with Civic Life for so long, you probably know about like the excessive churn that has been recorded over the last few years. And so it takes a special care for the community to come into a bureau knowing that background and that reputation. All of us, pretty much like the staff over here that has joined the bureau over the last 2 years, we all have that reflex of Googling pretty much our future employer. And when you Google Civic Life, like, unless you really care about the community, and unless you really care about like bringing some type of impact, there's not that much incentive into really feeling the motivation. Jokes aside, nobody is taking away the credit from Southeast Uplift or from CNN or NECN or any other partner, as a matter of fact. This is not a decision. And sorry if I'm repeating myself, but we are in a budgetary constraint. This is not like the neighborhood team deciding how much money we're going to give based on our personal preferences, based on our personal assessment on XYZ nonprofit and the type of work they're doing. It is a constraint for us as well. And as I mentioned, we are fully aware of the impact citywide of Southeast, and more specifically of Southeast Uplift. And that's why I mentioned earlier that during this current fiscal year, Southeast Uplift, but not only Southeast Uplift area, also like the East Portland Community Office, which is the entire community east of 82nd, which is even more diverse if we rely only on those data points that you were referring to. Both current coalition offices, for the very first time, got a equity coefficient on top of the demographic coefficient. When the funds are available, when there is good financial management, when there is sustainable incomes at the citywide level, all the bureaus are funded. And we are not shy, when that is the case, to push forward the most daring, the most actually needed equity-driven programs and initiatives. But the situation in the current context right now doesn't allow for that level of sophistication. And we are going through that citywide transition. And the reality is that now we see like these 4 blocks. This is a decision coming from Portlanders. People voted for that. They wanted to see that split. The most logical thing to avoid complexity, especially for the folks, I am an immigrant myself. My mom doesn't speak English. She cannot live in one district and expect some services in another one. It's just like we take into account those little considerations every single day. But there's also the financial reality. That one, it's really hard to dismiss it. The commitment that I can make today is that the entire team with the partners, whenever there is some wiggling room to drive a little bit further, equity, and to make up a little bit of pretty much the inequality that we recorded, we look at doing it. But now, as a county, we also got to deal with the reality that we saw a decrease of $1 billion. And as a reminder, the entire city budget is a little bit more than $6 billion, to put things into perspective.
Well, that's a great discussion. Thank you, Maria and Murad, for taking us along into it. We it's like we're nearing the end. Yeah, I know we have a few more minutes, but I feel like we're kind of a good ending point. When should we expect future updates on this progress as we go forward to July 1st in the new fiscal year? When do you anticipate new milestones or updates into the programming to arrive?
Absolutely. I will ask actually IC to give us like the clear citywide timeline so that our guests and the community at large know exactly what to expect. Those dates are valid for Civic Life, but any other bureau you might be interested in. IC, if you don't mind just taking it from here. No.
Yes, give me 1 second. I am trying to locate the city timeline, budget timeline to share.
I see
Would this
there's a
be-
question in the,
Yeah,
sorry,
Nancy.
you,
No, go ahead for it.
I see that there's a question in the chat that ties into the timeline, and it's asking when Civic Life presents their budget requests to the council in a work session. If we can include that in that, I see that would be great. Thank you.
So, but while IC is looking for that, the work sessions will be service area focused this year. So that is a little change. And therefore, if we're talking about a work session involving Civic Life, we're talking actually about the city administrator service area work session, which will be inclusive of Civic Life and the other bureau within that service area, Office of Equity and Human Rights, Office of Government Relations, the Portland Solution Programs, and some other new senior positions. Sorry, back at you, Isaac.
Yes, sorry, I am still trying to look for that. Apologies for not being prepared for that. But I know that later on, after the submission is all done, there will be public hearing session where the public can submit their testimony or request to be to give their testimony in person during that time. So I will, apologies, I will find that for you. If we do need to go, I will share it with the DCO group and they will send it out to you guys.
A big, just kind of like the big dates. Tomorrow is the cutoff for all city service areas, bureaus, in terms of kind of like submitting the data entry into the software used by our accounting systems. So by the end of business day tomorrow, no more changes will be possible at the service area level. Getting a little bit more into details, because this is the first year where we have some type of budgetary consolidation within each service area. As far as we are concerned as a bureau, the numbers have already been shared with our operation and finance lead within that service area. And then the expectation will be for them to consolidate our requested budget with the requested budget from the 4-5 other sister bureaus and programs that we have within the service area, and have that submitted to the city budget office before the cutoff tomorrow evening. Once that it's done, all the requested budgets should be available online through the city budget office website. IC and Sandra already put the links to those in the chat, so thank you. Matthew, thank you for putting actually the requested. From there, this becomes pretty much like a budget office process all the way until the new fiscal year. As mentioned by IC, we will have like some budget working sessions taking place, I do believe, as early as in March. We will make sure to get you the exact dates for those. And that will take us all the way to May/June for the adopted budget, which once again, when available and fully vetted by City Council, will be made available through the exact same resources of the citywide budget office, with all the details per service area. But we will get to the exact dates via email. I think it'll be more accurate to do it this way.
The link that I provided has all of the important dates listed, and there are 3 public hearing sessions, and the first one will happen on April 10th.
There you go.
Thank you, IC. Appreciate you. Jose.
Yes, I just wanted to quickly, since a lot of the conversation has been around budget, and we deal with budget a lot and discuss it a lot at the Government Transition Advisory Committee, is that do know that everything's been cut all across the board everywhere, and everyone is also asking for a lot more, including a lot of things with the transition. There's conversations around district offices. A lot of people want the councilors to be housed in district. Well, district offices are very expensive. So wherever you add anything that costs money, you have to take it from somewhere else. So when you're saying you want Southeast Uplift to have a lot more, you'd have to take it from somewhere else. Outer East Side has historically been underfunded. They're getting more funding than ever before. So do you want to take it from them? Where do you want to take it from? Everything is a balancing act. Unfortunately, we don't have a limited budget, but there's a lot of conversations. So if you think certain areas need to be prioritized, say Southeast Uplift or the in-district offices or whatever aspect of the new government you want prioritized in the budget, you have to make public comment and tell your counselor that. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Thank you.
Great context. Thank you, Jose, for that contextualizing. Murad, did you want to add something more?
I want to thank the folks that took the time to come tonight. And I feel like we keep meeting as of lately on these kind of like info session, evening time. But again, it's always refreshing, and it gives us a sense of purpose to see this level of engagement. It means that like we're not working for nothing, because definitely things are interesting, challenging in a good way with all of the change management going on, challenging in a less fun way with the budget constraints. But the overall sentiment that I like to drive with is pretty much hope. The voters expressed a certain sentiment around like the voting districts, a certain form of government. Only good things can come out of it. Now the transition is going to be painful, but I'm thankful for the team that I'm having, and I'm thankful for the partners. So thank you so much actually for moderating, Matthew, and thank you, Nancy and Southeast Uplift, for hosting. Thank you, Kimberly, and the entire team. IC, Juliet. That's like, I don't want to miss any name, but pretty much everybody is here, from the neighborhood team to the business operation team to the partners to the Southeast Uplift staff. So at least, as I said, like there's a little bit of feel good out of all of this. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Civic Life, for being here tonight. A simple session. We hope people got most of their answers questioned tonight. And like I said, we'll follow up those questions to your team and try to get out to you, post these slides. And just thank you for being out there. Thanks for being our neighbor.
Together, we're better.
Have a good one.